My boyfriend and I made the decision to head to the Red River Gorge in Kentucky for a camping trip. Unlike our previous trips with friends, this time it was just the two of us going. Upon arriving at the car park, we started packing up our gear in preparation for the 2-kilometer hike to our overnight camping spot. Suddenly, two strange men emerged from the dense forest, casting disgruntled glances at us and heading towards their motorhome parked nearby. This incident struck me as unusual, but I quickly dismissed those thoughts. Having finished packing up, we headed deep into the woods along a pre-trodden path. With a good idea of our surroundings, we reached the camping area and proceeded to choose a place to pitch our tent. On one of the hills, I spotted someone's camp, and we decided to set up our camp on the opposite side so that we wouldn't be seen. However, we were close enough to hear a loud argument going on from the other side of the hill. After we set up camp and it started to get dark, we went into the forest to get wood for the fire. Suddenly, a man from the car park approached us, offering to help us build a fire and offering to sell us firewood for $10. I laughed as there were branches lying around that we could have taken for free. He claimed that he had already collected all the firewood in the forest over the past few weeks. This made me suspicious, so I asked him how long he had been here. He replied that it was almost a month and he had been doing it all alone. He told us his story, full of ambiguities, and claimed that we were the first people he had seen in the last couple of weeks. He took us to his camp, and I noticed that there were several people's belongings there, not just his. This caused me some concern. As it started to get dark, we decided to walk back to our camp. The man said he liked to see everyone from the hill pointing to our camp. This made me wary. Going back to the tent made me uncomfortable. We decided to stay, but all night we heard leaves rustling near our camp. I was sure it was that person following us. The next morning, deciding we couldn't stay here, we threw up our tent and left. As we were leaving the forest, this man shouted, asking why we were leaving. I don't know what he was up to, but I thought he might have been dangerous. I contacted the local forestry department to report him, but I don't know if they took any action. In the end, the only thing he got from use was our tent. During the summer, 3 friends and I went camping near the Willamette River. After traveling some distance through the woods, we found a suitable place to camp and set up there. In the evening, we fished, listened to music, and then couldn't resist drinking to the point where everything seemed fun. Our merriment lasted until 2 o'clock in the morning, after which we went to bed. We split up, me and one friend in one tent, the other 2 in the other. When I first lay down, we heard laughter coming from our friend's tent. At first, we ourselves laughed when we heard them laughing, but soon we got bored and asked them to quiet down. Then one of them said, "That's not us." I looked at my friend in bewilderment. I could clearly hear the laughter coming from very close to the camp. The tension only increased as the laughter got closer and louder. My friend and I looked at each other anxiously. The 2 from the other tent nervously asked what was going on. The laughter got even closer, and then I realized it belonged to a man. Sounds like he was drunk too came from over there, but we couldn't hear any other voices but his. Something about his laughter seemed strange to me, as if it was missing something. It was hard to explain in words, but it was very evident at that moment. The laughter was getting closer, and now it sounded right outside our camp. However, no footsteps or crunching of leaves could be heard. To get through to our tents without a sound seemed impossible. But then the laughter suddenly stopped. We didn't know where the man was because we hadn't heard a single footstep. We looked over to our friend again. He was scared, but still holding on. A dead silence settled all around, but then it was broken by a sound, the sound of something rubbing against the wall of our tent. We turned round and saw on one of them the clear outline of a hand pressing directly on the fabric. We screamed, ran out of the tent, and ran into the night forest. The other 2 followed us. After a few minutes of running, we finally made it to my car. The long run had made me vomit in the car park, but I quickly recovered and got behind the wheel. While a DUI is not justified, we had no other options at that point. It was the scariest incident of my life. Whoever this person was and whatever they wanted, it remained a mystery. It happened during our Boy Scout camping trip when I was 15 years old. After a full day of hiking, we finally found a suitable spot and set up camp. My friend, with whom we had planned to share a tent, backed out at the last minute. so I had to pitch it myself. The sun was starting to set and I was still struggling with setting up the tent. Setting it up by myself proved to be not such an easy task. Eventually, one of our group came up and offered to help, and after that we went to dinner. After an hour of scary stories around the campfire, we dispersed to our tents. It was only then that I realized that sleeping alone in a tent wasn't so bad, because there was so much more room. I fell asleep quickly, but in the middle of the night I woke up to the sound of footsteps outside my tent. I thought one of ours had gone to the bathroom or something, but the footsteps seemed to be circling around me. Since all of our tents were pretty far apart, I began to suspect that someone from another unit had decided to play a prank on me. Asking, "Who's there?" I heard footsteps quickly moving away in the woods. I wanted to go out and check who it was, but I decided it wasn't worth it. I lay back down but couldn't sleep because of the anxiety. Just then the footsteps came back. They were circling around my tent again. Out of anger, I got up, unzipped the door, and expected to see one of my squad mates. But when I looked out, I saw an unfamiliar man, about 30 years old, about 2 meters tall. My heart sank and I just froze in place. The man smiled and put his finger to his lips. I abruptly went back inside and ran screaming towards the counselors' tents. On the way, one of them came out to meet me and asked me what was wrong. I, breathing heavily, told about the stranger at camp. One of the counselors took his rifle, and together we went to look around my tent and the surrounding woods. The man was gone, but the counselors found footprints leading around my tent. The next morning, our camping trip was canceled and we returned home. After this incident, I never agreed to camping again. There is a huge lake in my hometown, a place of grandeur and emptiness, perfect for camping, fishing, and hunting. This pristine place is full of possibilities and is a testament to the Norwegian tradition known as every man's right. According to this tradition, a person can move freely throughout the country except on private property. Norwegians, being avid nature lovers, often seek solace in its serene landscapes. In places where there is room for everyone, one can find respite from the chaos of civilization. This is exactly what happened when my close friend and I went on a camping trip. Our destination was an island in the middle of a lake that we planned to reach by boat. When we arrived at the site, we found an idyllic spot that had clearly not been inhabited by campers before us. But there was one feature that sent a chill down my spine. It was huge and stared at the campsite with dead, dried-up eyes. As dusk fell, a series of events unfolded that sent chills down my spine. We gathered around the campfire, feasting, talking, and enjoying the summer night. In Norway, summer is ephemeral and night doesn't come until around 2 in the morning. In the midst of this plunge into darkness, something caught my eye in the expanse of the lake. Although I could not discern its true nature, I could not find it in me to be disturbed. Eventually, we dispersed to our tents and went to bed. That night I was tormented by disturbing dreams. The pike, which I had dreamed earlier, seemed alive. Its eyes were in motion, accompanied by unusual sounds. The colors of the sky changed incessantly. In my slumber, I discerned a figure crossing the lake. The water was evaporating to sink to the bottom again. A pike spoke and laughed, causing me to wake up instantly. My body was wet with sweat, and as I looked around, I realized that it was still deep night. I was only 14 years old at the time, and my mind had yet to fully form. Participating in underage drinking certainly didn't contribute to this, but I found myself gripped by an inexplicable fear. I could not understand its origin, but it was the same trepidation that made me turn away from everything that was happening. I had no desire to open the tent, so I lay still, pretending to be asleep. I could hear the sounds coming from my dream, the same sounds that were coming from the head hanging from the tree. My body tensed, my heart pounding with each passing second. Then I heard the distant hum of human voices, no more than 100 meters away. However, it was clear that the source of the voices was not on land, as our island was too small and had been surrounded in only 5 minutes. There was an eerie laughter in the air that did not sound like human laughter. At one point, I thought someone or something was approaching our camp. Fear gripped me and I froze in place. Gradually, fatigue took its toll and I fell back into unconsciousness. Morning came, and I awoke when my friend was already up. I asked him if he had heard the sounds, but he said he had not. A doubt arose in me, and I wondered if it was all a figment of my imagination. At that moment, I noticed a figure in pale garb standing on a rudimentary raft 200 meters away from me on the lake. My heart was pounding frantically in my chest because I could not distinguish any facial features. The figure froze in silent expectation, and our anxiety grew with each passing moment. Finally, we decided to pack up and sail away. We had a motorboat, which thankfully started up fine. You know how it is in horror movies. Still, I can't forget the way he looked at us. When we left the lake and got to the river, he remained motionless like a ghost. It suddenly dawned on me that the figure I had noticed on the lake the previous night was most likely the same man who had been standing there all along. Could he be the source of those voices I had heard? I knew we were alone on this small island, a place devoid of drunken teenage antics in the heart of the night. Could it be that he had purposely hung a fish head from a tree to scare off uninvited guests? Had we unwittingly trespassed on his sacred territory? And most importantly, why was he on a raft in the middle of the lake? Had he set foot on our island while we were slumbering, plotting sinister schemes? And to whom was he shouting and laughing? Alas, none of these questions are answered, and I have since refrained from revisiting the place. And the memory of that encounter with my friend still sends shivers down my spine whenever anyone mentions the mysterious figure on the raft.